Okay, let's get started today. We are going to talk about kids with ADHD and their struggle to manage time. Okay, so kids with ADHD and time management tips and tricks is what I'm calling it. So I just want to take a minute and introduce myself. My name is Dr. Tara Egan, and I am the owner of a business called Dr. Tara Egan LLC. And you can find me at www.drtaraegan.com. I'm a therapist. I work with children and adolescents. I'm also a parent coach. I am an author, and I am a podcast host. So I co-host a podcast with my daughter called One Day You'll Thank Me. And we release new episodes every Wednesday. And we interview a series of guest experts. Sometimes her and I do an episode by ourselves. We do what we call solo episodes. And it's a really great resource for parents. So it's got some hardcore information. So please join us. But today we're going to take a few minutes to talk about ADHD and time management. Now, we have done some other videos that address issues related to ADHD. So this is kind of a follow-up with some of those things. And I think we've got some really great suggestions for you today. So let's get started. I just want to take a minute and remind you that there's 3 types of ADHD. And this is what is described in the DSM-5, which this is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. We're on our 5th edition. And the manual discusses how there is ADHD inattentive type, which is symptoms related to poor listening, maybe like losing and misplacing items, easily sidetracked, forgets daily activities, just limited attention span, struggles to maintain their focus during tasks that require sustained attention, making careless mistakes, rushing through things like that. The hyperactivity type of ADHD, actually, that's really where you're going to see kids rushing through assignments, where they're more likely to fidget, they act like they're driven by a motor, they're very restless, maybe they have a hard time staying seated, or they can be overly talkative. So that's ADHD in hyperactive type, so that's the second type of ADHD. And then the third type is when we combine those two together and we see the symptoms of inattention and the symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity. And so that's when that's when people think of what a child with ADHD looks like. That's usually the version they're most likely to think of, is the child who struggles with both attention and focus and hyperactivity and impulsivity. So just some things to consider before we get started with talking about strategies with time management is that ADHD isn't just a within child issue. It's not something that like, okay, this is a child who has something going on with their brain development and like they just kind of have to deal with it. It's important to recognize that that the symptoms as they occur are really about what's going on within that child's brain development, as well as how they're interacting with the environment. So if you're a teacher out there, we're talking about how you interact with the student. If you're a parent, we talk about the environment you're setting up at home and how you communicate with your child. So it's really important to understand that all of those dynamics work together when it comes to understanding a child with ADHD. We also know that these kids really benefit from getting into a problem-solving frame of mind. So this is when you are able to communicate to your kids about using strategies, acknowledging where there's things that are difficult for them, and really focusing on like, okay, you're having a hard time with this. What strategies can we use to support you with this? Because ADHD is very much a disorder that is managed. It's not necessarily something you grow out of. But if you learn strategies and you use them consistently, then it's more likely to have a minimal impact on your life. So as we're raising these kids or educating these kids, and we're supporting them when it comes to managing their time, controlling their impulses, regulating their emotions, staying focused, staying motivated, it's really important to approach it with a problem-solving mindset, because it's not something we want kids to feel shame about. It's not something that we want to scold kids for. This is a really brain-based disorder, and it's really important that we treat it as such. Let's talk about a little bit about what time management is. Because this video focuses on kids with ADHD, and how to help them manage their time, I just want to take a minute and talk about what time management is. Time management is the ability to plan and control how someone spends their hours in their day to effectively accomplish their goals. So there's some people where time management comes very naturally to. They kind of are able to look at the span of their day or their week or their month or even their year and kind of just automatically organize it so that it's efficient and they're getting the tasks done that need to be prioritized, and they're spending less effort or focus on things that are not as important. Right now I'm in the process of writing a book, and so time management is really essential. And I know it comes pretty easy to me. I don't have ADHD. So if you have a child who has ADHD and they're struggling with time management, it's really going to be important that they learn strategies, because it's not necessarily going to come easily to them or naturally to them. So one thing when it comes to helping kids with ADHD with time management is understanding the importance of structure when it comes to time management. We really want to establish a routine that has clear step-by-step directions where tasks occur with predictable patterns and predictable places. So we want to provide as much opportunity for things to just be familiar and automatic. And in order to do this, it's best to present directions both orally and visually. So if you think of a teacher in a classroom who says, okay, class, this is what I want you to do in your assignment, but then they also have maybe a directions sheet that the children can refer to, or maybe they have something posted up on the whiteboard that the kids can use as a reference point. So for people who don't have ADHD, you might be able to convey directions either orally or visually, and that person's going to remember them enough to do a reasonably good job on a task. But kids with ADHD are going to benefit from both methods of communicating directions. We also want to make sure that kids with ADHD are reinforced when they're following directions, because following directions takes up more cognitive resources, meaning it just is more of a mental strain and they're quicker to get sort of exhausted by the whole process. It's really important to reinforce when they're doing a good job, managing their time, following routines, falling into that predictable pattern of behavior. It can be reinforced. You can just give them praise. Maybe you give them some sort of small reward, like, hey, if you get to the end of your assignment, then you get some time to do something fun. Maybe it's spend time with the pets out in the backyard, or they want to hop on their iPad and look at something for a few minutes. But we really want to reinforce them when they do a good job, and if necessary, give consequences if they're not following those routines and procedures. So, and that, I call it a tax. They might need some sort of tax to give them feedback that, hey, you're not following the routine, so you need to get back on track with that. The goal is to have kids improve their stamina and compliance when it comes to following routines. If we have a child who really just, everything kind of seems chaotic or haphazard as far as what they focus on and follow through with, and what things they just disregard and let go of, to expect them to go from, let's say, following directions 30 or 40% of the time up to 90% of the time or 100% of the time is probably not realistic. And if you're expecting that from them, you're going to be met with frustration. But if you say, okay, here's a goal, we want to be improving your stamina when it comes to staying focused on these routines, then to go from 30% to 50%, I want parents and teachers to acknowledge the improvement in that child so they can feel proud of themselves and they can feel more naturally reinforced to say, oh, wow, this is working. Like my teachers, my parents are pleased with me. I'm going to keep doing this. Or I got this little reward and I feel good about that. So we always want to be shooting for improvement 1 week over the next or 1 month over the next, so that kids can stay on track and start to learn and embrace these strategies into their daily lives so that they do them more automatically. So let's get to the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about actual strategies for time management. So I'm going to highlight probably like 6, I think, right here. And one of them I've already mentioned, where you're really focusing on creating routines that foster automaticity, which means where kids can minimize the toll on their cognitive resources, on the energy, the time and focus it takes to do a task, and they can just go through the rote process when they're doing a routine. So when you think about kids getting up in the morning, and when they know you get up, you go to the bathroom, while you're in the bathroom, you brush your teeth, you get dressed, you come down to the kitchen, you eat your breakfast, you put on your shoes, and then you go. And they know to do that automatically, and they don't have to put a lot of time and energy into it because they're in a rhythm. So as much as possible, we really want to specifically, in a detailed enough way, make sure they can follow the process. And once we've got that, then hopefully they'll do it more automatically. I also encourage parents and teachers out there to have kids visualize the final output. So what will this look like when it's finished? Okay, how will you know when this is done? And so it might be something like cleaning their room. So if you go by a child with ADHD standard of cleaning their room, it might be that they have poor time management and either rush through it and they feel like, gosh, I've been doing this forever, or they might take forever. And it's like, I checked on you 45 minutes ago and you've done kind of nothing. And you're not going along with the pace here to get this room cleaned before it's time for dinner or before we go to the pool, whatever it is. And so it's really important to say, all right, how are you going to know when this is done? Your clothes are going to be picked up off the floor. Your bed is going to be made. You're going to have put any trash into the trash bin, and all toys are picked up. And that's how you're going to know when it's done. And so you want them to kind of visualize what it looks like when you have a clean room, and then be able to articulate, okay, what steps are you going to need to take in order to do it? I also encourage parents to give kids an estimate of how long they think it will take. And I do this with my own children all the time, where I'll say, I think this is a job that's probably going to take you about 20 minutes. And so that lets them know if they rushed through it and they were done in 3 minutes, they probably have not given it the time and attention it deserves. Also, if 30, 40 minutes have gone by and they're still not done, then that should cue them that, hey, I'm not working efficiently, or I'm getting too bogged down in the details, and I'm not on pace to be done with this task, whatever it is. So I think that telling your kids, okay, like with teachers, they'll say, all right, I want you to spend 3 to 4 minutes writing 2 sentences. And I know with my own kids, there's times when I'll say, okay, I think this assignment's going to take you about a half an hour. So that means at 15 minutes, you should be about halfway done. So if you're not, that might be a time to check in. Are you following directions? Do you need help? Because that would be a good opportunity to ask for help versus waiting until everything's supposed to be done and then saying, gosh, that was really hard, or I didn't know what to do. So I just kind of stopped and got really stagnant. Another strategy is using an analog clock to show the passage of time. So you can see in this video, there's one behind me where kids can look at the minute hand and see that time is passing. So a lot of times that gives a real visual component for kids to see, all right, I've got about this much longer to work on the assignment before it's done. And I know teachers really focus on this with elementary students. Okay, well, when it gets to 11:30, that's going to be time that we're going to get ready to go to lunch. And so, that teacher will prompt the kids as that minute hand is getting closer and closer to the time that indicates that, the time has been used up. Another thing is using a timer. So a lot of times kids with ADHD, when they struggle with time management, they have what's called time blindness, which means they just don't really recognize the passing of time. So you'll notice these are kids who, if you ask them how long ago something happened, they can't tell you if it happened, like 2 or 3 days ago, or it happened 2 weeks ago. Or you'll talk about, oh, when did you guys go on that family vacation? And they can't say, oh, when I was 8 years old. They just don't have a sense of time about that. Or if you ask them, how long have you been playing video games? They'll be very inadequate at estimating the appropriate time. So this is not them being difficult or trying to withhold information. This is just a product of them, of their diagnosis of ADHD, of what we call time blindness. So sometimes using a timer can be effective for having kids understand the amount of time that's passing. So sometimes when I work with families and they have kids who are allotted a certain amount of video game time, I'll have parents use timers to cue them, hey, your time's halfway done. You got 5 more minutes. It's all done. And then that way you're not relying on them to monitor it themselves, because that's just something that's so very difficult for them and would take up a lot of cognitive resources and be pretty exhausting. The last strategy I want to mention when it comes to ADHD and time management is focusing on having your child do one portion of the assignment at a time. So there's a couple reasons for this. One, it prevents rushing. So if you, for example, want them to work on a homework assignment, you might just give them, you might take a piece of paper and cover up the second half of the worksheet so they can only see the top part of the problems, or maybe the first row of problems. And you're like, all right, I want you to take the next, 5 or 10 minutes to get this first row of problems. And then when they're done, maybe they can show it to you so you can say, oh, you made some careless mistakes, or you did a great job and now you're ready to keep moving. So sometimes these kids, they'll look at an assignment and they'll feel so overwhelmed and they'll do parts of it, they do it really randomly, or they just get really stuck because it seems like so much. Same thing with cleaning their rooms. Oftentimes we do it in a series of steps. The first step is for you to put your Legos away. Just do that first and then come and get me. And then the second thing we're going to have you do is actually pick up your clothes or make your bed, whatever it is. So taking those assignments and just doing one portion at a time can prevent them from rushing or getting overwhelmed. Some other things I wanted to mention just about organization. So this is the process of organizing their stuff, designating a space, as well as organizing their time. So when we talk about organizing stuff, this is where we want to have supplies accessible to kids. So if there's a homework spot in your house, you might want to have a container that has pens and pencils in it, or maybe has sticky notes or has extra notebooks, whatever it is, so that it's not a process of every day is a mystery as far as where their supplies are. There's appropriate lighting there. If they need to have a printer, it's all there in one spot and their stuff is organized. You can use baskets, binders, folders, color-coded things, whatever is going to work for your kids. Some kids need to keep it simple. They need to have one folder, and one side is to do during class, and one side is what you bring home and do at home for homework. And other kids want to separate out. I don't want to say they want to, but what works best for them is they separate out each class with a separate colored folder. And then they know, okay, when I'm done with my social studies, I put it in my blue folder, and then they have more of an opportunity to keep things segmented. So that's organizing stuff. Then you want to, like I mentioned, designate that space so everything is there and they know the automatic process of going to that space and what you do in that space. So we see that teachers do this all the time where they have a reading nook and they know when you're in that part of the classroom, the behaviors associated with it are you need to be quiet, you need to be sitting on your bottom, and you need to have a book in your lap. And so when kids associate routines with a certain space, that can be really helpful for them. And then the last thing is organizing their time, using a planner to break down assignments and monitor due dates, to break down projects into big chunks. So it might be I need to do my first draft by this date, and then I need to do my edits by this date, and I need to do my final copy by this date. And then you want kids to be able to factor in the other things that are impacting their schedule. So maybe they have sports practices or social activities or, doctor's appointments. And so you want your child to be able to look at that over the course of a week and recognize, okay, on Wednesday, I have karate. And so that day I'm going to have less opportunity to do homework. So maybe on Tuesday night, I should do more of my project because I'm not going to have as much time on Wednesday. So kids with ADHD, when it comes to time management, they really benefit from being able to at least hopefully look at about a week at a time. If you look too big picture, that can be overwhelming and it all just kind of looks like nonsense. But if you have the week and you can have a conversation, all right, what are some things you need to do on each of these days so that they can understand what to prioritize, because they're not necessarily going to be confident at managing their time if they have to do it day by day, and every day is like kind of a new discussion and it feels like they're starting from scratch. Another thing I wanted to mention is when it comes to time management, you have to motivate these kids, because time management doesn't come easily to them. They might not see the benefits offhand. It might be more of an adult initiated thing of, let's teach you how to plan and write down your assignments. And it might be hard for them to get invested in the process of using these strategies. But that's where like an external reward system can work, where they have the opportunity to earn rewards, get acknowledgement for their work. So your focus is not so much on the desired outcome. It's not just based on, did you get your math homework done, but did you do the process? Did you write the assignment down in the assignment book? Did you have a piece of paper on hand to show your work? And then did you submit them the way the teacher asked you to? So in that situation, you would want to reward them using those strategies effectively, not just focus on, did you get your math done? Because they might not have used any of the strategies, and then they're not going to be practiced at using those strategies on another time. So it's really about focusing on productivity, not so much accuracy. So we want to put some rewards in place that are meaningful to that child so they can be invested to use the strategies. And that's really, really helpful for kids. And those rewards might need to kind of go on for a while, because they might not have the internal motivation, which is part of the ADHD diagnosis, to just have their rhythm kick in and feel really invested in something, because it's probably going to consistently be hard for them. So really making sure that they feel supported by you, that they know what strategies to default to, and that they get recognized for doing a great job. That's what I wanted to cover today, is to focus on kids with ADHD and time management. I always encourage you to visit my website at www.drterryegan.com, and you can find more resources there. You can get access to my books. You can get access to the podcast, other channels or other videos on YouTube. And then also, if you are interested in learning more about our webinars and online courses, or even working with me individually as a parenting coach, that's where you're going to find all the information you need on that. So www.drterryegan.com. Thank you so much for listening to this today. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you soon.